Rise up!
This is Howard Balzer, and welcome to this Cardinals update for the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Well, week one of the 2024 season is over for the Cardinals, and I say this every year, and I've been saying it for a long time in the many years that I've been covering the NFL. After week one, half the fan bases think their team is going to the Super Bowl, and the other half are looking for a nearby bridge to jump off because every play that didn't work is magnified. And there's the thought that, hey, we might not beat anybody this season. And judging by the reaction to the Cardinals' 34-28 loss to the Buffalo Bills, I'm shocked that there's people that are shocked. Some saying, wow, we knew it was going to be hard to stop Josh Allen, and we weren't able to do it. Well, no kidding. That's the story of the NFL. The overrated, according to some, Josh Allen has done this throughout his career. In fact, I'll lay a couple of numbers on you. This was the fourth career game for Allen where he passed for 2 touchdowns and rushed for 2 touchdowns. There's only one other player in NFL history that has done that, and that's Hall of Famer Steve Young. But wait, I'll give you one more. This was the 20th game in his career that he passed for at least 2 touchdowns and had a rushing touchdown. Only one player in history has more, Cam Newton with 22, and one has the same number, Aaron Rodgers. So pretty good company that Josh Allen is in. And the whole lament that the Cardinals pass rush isn't very good and they couldn't contain Josh Allen, well, no kidding. That's what happens with most teams against Josh Allen, and it was certainly the case in this game. Now, I'm not here just to look for silver linings, but the overreaction to any loss is maybe understandable, but it really shouldn't be, because you still should be able to look at things through an objective and not an emotional lens. Give you a couple of other notes. The Cardinals, with obviously a very poor offensive performance in the second half with only 80 yards, ended up with 270 in the game. That was still more than 9 teams had in week one, and tied with one team, which also had 270. There were only 14 teams in the NFL. We still have a game Monday night, but there were only 14 teams in the league, so that's half of the games that have been played so far, that gained at least 300 yards in week one. We always have to remember, this is the first time teams are playing football, real football, for 8 months if you didn't make the playoffs, and a little bit less if you did. And so there is definitely a getting into rhythm process that occurs in the NFL. Now, I think what threw everybody off in this game is the Cardinals came out really humming and scored on their first 3 possessions to take a 17-3 lead. Unfortunately, it didn't play out in the second half, but that can happen. The other interesting point in terms of numbers is that the Bills gained 352 yards in this game. They were one of those teams that had at least 300. That was under their average from last year when they were 4th in the NFL, averaging 374.5 yards per game. So that's why I say, take a deep breath. This was a very good team the Cardinals played, and judging by some of the reaction, you would have thought they lost 34-10 instead of 34-28. Let's also keep in mind, and there are some that go after GM Monty Ossenfort because he didn't go out there and make a splash and spend big money on a pass rusher, as if one guy might have made a difference in today's game. But let's keep this in mind in terms of the way this team is being built. Of the 48 active players in this game, 7 were rookies, and another 10 were rookies last year. So that's 17 of the 48, over 35% of the roster. And yes, it's disappointing that Marvin Harrison only had 3 targets in the game and caught 1 pass for 4 yards. Well, Michael Wilson, who everyone expects to take a jump this year, didn't have much either. In fact, those 2 guys combined for 2 catches for a total of 9 yards. And the one-score games, Jonathan Gannon said an interesting thing after the game. He said, we're ready to get back and work hard for the game against the Rams next week. And he said, this team sees we're a couple of plays away from making them to win the game. He also then said, you have to make those plays to win in the NFL. And that is the one truism of this sport, where a lot of games are decided by one score. The Cardinals were 2-5 in those games last year, and now they are 0-1. And in this week so far, prior to the Monday night game, there were 10 games decided by one score or less, and 11 that were one score or less in the fourth quarter. Once again, that is the reality of the National Football League. And you can't sit here and say we know it's going to change for this team. But I think any objective, smart observer can see that this team is getting better. It doesn't mean you're going to go from 4-13 to 10 or 11 wins, as some have predicted, maybe a little bit not making a whole lot of sense. But it is getting better. And so you try to look at both sides of every equation, and that's one thing that's important. And one point I'll make also, in the freeze frames that are there, it's unfortunate. Has anyone ever hit pause on their TV, on the remote, and all of a sudden someone's talking, and all of a sudden you hit pause, and all of a sudden the person's eyes are closed? Well, of course, you don't see that when you're watching the person talk, because it's going quickly. And yet there's a freeze frame that was all over social media from the backside that showed the play where Marvin Harrison was open in the fourth quarter, late in the game. And then it appeared to show Kyler Murray standing in the pocket looking right at him. And people say, well, wow, look at that. Look at that. How could he not see him? Well, he wasn't standing still. That was a freeze frame of a play where he was scrambling. He first went back in the pocket. He then moved to his left and then moved back to his right. And he was running to his right when all of a sudden he kind of looked downfield, but more to the right side, and then kept rolling to the right and hit Greg Dortch for a gain and a first down in that drive, in that play. So the one thing we don't know is, when did Marvin Harrison come free? But there's no evidence that Kyler Murray was standing still, because he didn't on that play. And yet people will look at that and think that that was a legitimate way of analyzing that play. And you can just know it's not. And sometimes you just have to have a little discernment to look at these things and figure out what really happened. And of course, Murray was asked about it after the game, and he said, hey, things are moving fast. You're moving around. Things are going crazy. You can't see everything. No quarterback can. Sometimes it's amazing that they do when they find that guy downfield who broke open. But many, many times, if you ever really watch the tape and watch the All-22, you can see guys that are open that the quarterback just could not see, or for a variety of reasons. So just wanted to point that one out. And I thought Murray said an interesting thing too. And the TV announcers were all over it also on that 3rd and 10 play late in the game. And the Bills are expecting you to throw the ball. And so they tried to pop a run to James Conner, and he only got 3 yards. And so Jonathan Gannon said he liked the play call, and said we were trying to pop a run. And who knows? And what Kyler Murray said, though, was very true, because this is always true of play calling, because everybody's an expert after a game about play calling. And he said, hey, if it popped, you wouldn't be saying that, right? You'd be saying, oh, what a great play call. Well, a lot of times it's not the call, it's the execution of the play. And that is truly, in reality, what separates teams in the NFL. It's the execution throughout an entire game. And some teams on a given night, given game, the teams that win normally just have executed just a little bit better. But it's also true that you ask any coach, and they'll tell you that there's maybe 4 or 5 plays in a game that make the difference in winning or losing. But one thing is true that many are saying. If the Cardinals are going to become a good team, they have to win more of those close games and make those plays to help win a game, especially in the fourth quarter when there's so many games that are one-score games. That's the one thing everybody hopes. That's obviously what the Cardinals are believing will happen. But until we see it, we will continue to be frustrated. But once again, it's just the way of the world in the National Football League, where really even where there's differences in talent of teams, there's not a whole lot of difference. And that's why there are so many close games in this league. So I just ask everyone just to have a little bit of perspective. Look at things as not necessarily half empty, but maybe half full, and see that this team is on the rise and that things will be better. But how soon will that happen? Many looked at this game next week against the Rams and said, well, you know, the Rams have some issues. They have some problems. But boy, did they go toe-to-toe with the Lions on Sunday night. And it took overtime for Detroit to beat them. This is going to be a little bit angry, but a pretty talented team that's going to come into State Farm Stadium next Sunday, where the Cardinals will try to win a division game, one thing they weren't able to do last season. And that's where this game becomes truly important to really feel good about improving. Probably will be. Chances are it'll be a close game. Can the Cardinals do enough? Can they make those plays to win it? Well, next week at this time, we'll have our answer. That wraps up this Cardinals update. This is Howard Balzer for the Rise Up See Red podcast. We'll be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.